Continuous glucose monitors, they were reading inside your body, which meant that we could apply machine learning to this kind of data to collect longitudinal data on people and to be able to track their health over a period of time and be able to inform them of small things they could make changes around to be able to have positive outcomes. So our company is an AI company that predicts your glucose.
Welcome back to the Fitt Insider podcast. I'm your host, Joe Beneri. Today I'm joined by Noosheen Hashemi, founder and CEO of January AI, a precision health company. In this episode, we talk about using glucose monitoring to improve well-being. Noosheen explains how January leverages digital twins to create personalized health insights, and she cautions against deceptive marketing practices in the digital health space. Let's get into it. Hi, Noosheen. Welcome to Fitt Insider. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Looking forward to the conversation today. I think a lot of exciting things to talk about as it relates to both what you're working on and the broader kind of metabolic health category. But to get started, can you introduce yourself and tell us about January AI?
Absolutely. My background has been in software for decades. I was at Oracle for about a decade, and then a startup, and then a family office where we've invested in over 140 companies. And then I was essentially going into some of the portfolio companies in operating roles in, say, 2013. And in 2016, 17, decided to start January AI. Teamed up with Mike Snyder to start the company. And I can tell you about that if you're interested. But essentially, our interest was in bringing multi-omics to the masses, starting with very inexpensive wearables. So rather than start with whole genome sequence and the whole microbiome and all of those things, we thought, what can inexpensively tell us a lot about health? And there was an inflection point. Up to that point, people were using fitness trackers really for fitness. The wearables have been used for more likely for just like counting steps and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So continuous glucose monitors, they were reading inside your body. They were sort of, for the first time, they were being considered for health. And now, of course, so are heart rate monitors are now health trackers as well. So we felt that they were accessible, inexpensive, and continuous, which meant that we could apply machine learning to this kind of data to collect longitudinal data on people and to be able to track their health over a period of time and be able to inform them of, small things they could make, changes around to be able to have positive outcomes in terms of their markers and everything else. So we were really excited about that, and we wanted to start there and then add omics as we go. The company has been around for about 4.5 years. We hired our first technical person in November of 2017, and we spent the next 3 years in research. So we were looking at what heart rate and CGM data together mean. We are revolutionary in that sense. We were pioneering, and we then kind of realized that we wanted to know what people were actually eating. And so we committed ourselves to years of research around nutritional intelligence. So we built a big database of foods. We created labels for foods that did not have labels, so nutritional labels. So right now, only groceries and chain restaurants have labels, and nothing else has labels. So we spent an enormous amount of time in a machine learning effort to develop labels for foods. And we then also spent an enormous amount of time coming up with glycemic index and glycemic load of foods. So enhanced labeling that doesn't exist today for foods, because essentially glycemic response is better associated with glycemic load of foods as opposed to with carbs alone, because you often don't eat carbs by themselves, and not all carbs are created equal. You eat carbs with maybe foods you eat, they have protein, fat, water, fiber. So these were like foundational work that we did to enable turning food into an assay. So if you're basically building mathematical models of someone's metabolic health, what is the role of their heart rate and activity? What is the role of food? What is the role of their glucose? I wish there was a continuous insulin tracker in the world, because that would provide a very, very valuable piece of information that is now missing from everyone's calculations. But our company is an AI company that predicts your glucose.
When you talk about that, there's so much that, when you think about starting the company, what just from a hardware perspective that enabled, how you leverage that with software and AI, then what that looks like in terms of considering not only just what people are eating, but how they exercise, how they sleep, all these other factors that go into it. And you mentioned, being an AI company. How does the consumer experience that from the outside? So they're getting prescribed a continuous glucose monitor. You have the app, but thinking about that experience in terms of how they are then given the data, the insights in a way that's actionable, easy for them to understand, beyond
Totally.
just
Yeah.
like the glycemic load, beyond the foods that are getting kind of calculated behind the scenes. What are they experiencing? And then how has that kind of user experience evolved as you've gone through this research process?
Okay, great. So the way that AI benefits people, it creates a digital twin for them. So rather than them having to eat something to see its impact, they can feed it to the twin to see the impact. So the experience that you have today with a lot of products out there is you go on their website and you order a CGM, you go through a telehealth service, you hook up your CGM to your app, and they give you a score or some kind of a feedback about the foods that you're eating. Maybe they can take a picture of that. Maybe they have text with that and things like that. Well, the information that's gathered today about those things has no nutritional intelligence. When you do that in January, it does. So you know how much GIGL it has, or it knows how much macros it had in terms of carbs, proteins, fats. And you know how much fiber you're eating, which is really important to metabolic health. Fiber is essential to lowering your blood sugar. And so I can talk about fiber for the whole hour, but it is a really critical factor. So we track that. So what this means is usually with those products, you will have to consume something and retroactively see its response. But with January, after a period of training, you can now not have to eat something. You can simply look up a food and see how you might respond to that food. So it's a dramatically different user experience. It's vastly different. It's not the same user experience at all because it enables mindful eating. It enables for you to do mindful grocery shopping. You can look up, you can go to the grocery store and look up, scan a product and get your curve immediately for that instead of buying it and taking it home. You can experiment to see what would happen if you ate half of it, you ate 1/4 of it, 1/8 of it. You can do what if analysis. What if I ate half of it and walked 10 minutes? What would happen? Which none of these things you're able to do with other products in the marketplace. So AI allows you to essentially experientially learn what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And it's highly personalized to you.
Yeah, I think when you talk about it, there's just from the kind of standard user experience, maybe with other companies, not even just metabolic health, but certainly with like wearables in general, is just creating a feedback loop. And so you're
Exactly.
wearing it, you're doing this thing, and then it's telling you, here's what happened after you did this thing. And then it's kind of on you as the user to be like, okay, now I have to make a change. Hopefully, at best case scenario, I'm adapting based on this feedback. And some apps, different wearables for whatever the kind of modality is, like now they're starting to prescribe, hopefully, suggestions, right? Do this, take a walk after you eat, or maybe don't eat this thing or eat it at a different time, so on and so forth. But in this case of just kind of making sure I'm understanding it correctly, you're saying we've created a digital twin after a period of time where you actually don't have to do these things. You can create a situation in which, what if I did this thing? And then you see what happens, see that it's a bad result, and say, oh, I'm actually not going to do that thing. And if anybody's kind of new to the concept of a digital twin, it's, but we could probably talk about that for the entire conversation as well. But this idea of replicating based on a ton of different software and data, like essentially your body and how it's going to respond to different adaptations, inputs, so on and so forth. Can other people create this similar digital twin concept? If they're collecting the same data, could they do similar modeling to say, this is more predictive than it is reactionary? And if so, maybe like, why not in terms of what you've already put into that research?
Yeah. So, I mean, we took a very, very, my God, an extremely rigorous process, which is why it took us so long. And we've been perfecting it over the last 2 years, even since we put our poster out at the American Diabetes Association conference in 2020, when we presented our prediction model after our clinical trial, which took a year and a half to perform. So people could go through a rigorous process and end up with that, of course. But it really depends on how accurate it's going to be. There are prediction models today that predict glucose for type 1 folks, and they are a calculus between essentially carbs and insulin. And we are more accurate than those. And we are in a league of our own. We are able to predict your glucose more time in the future. So those papers are usually for 30 minutes in the future. We can predict your glucose 2 hours in the future. We can predict your glucose with food. They cannot. They only predict your glucose without food. Like if you ate nothing in the next 30 minutes, they can predict your glucose. And we can predict your glucose if the CGM is not even on you. And they cannot do that. They predict if the CGM is continually on you. So we are in a league of our own. I think we're a decade ahead. And I think the approach that we've taken has been very rigorous. And we've had, a series of very dedicated people that were very committed to doing this pioneering work. So I think a lot of machine learning people essentially think, well, you just throw a lot of data out there, eventually you'll figure it out. And that's by and large true. You can throw a bunch of things out there. Yes, if Google decided to do this, and if Amazon decided to do this, and Amazon knows maybe what drugs you're taking, Amazon knows what kind of exercise you're doing, if you're a camper or not, if you're buying tents and buy hiking shoes. I mean, yes, I think people like Amazon could put together an unbelievable picture of a person's life. But there is nuance to building these models, and there is work that's gone to them. It's very interesting. You show it to normal, like any kind of machine learning people, their first reaction is like, oh, so you did it like this. And you go, nope, I did not. I did that years ago. I tried that. But that did not have good results. And anybody can do that. No, that's not what I did. And then you did this. No, actually. And we have a tremendous amount of IP also around our work. We have IP around our nutritional inference work, where we can detect nutrients from text. Right now, when you log a salad with another company, you don't know what's in that salad. You don't know anything about that salad. You don't know if there's another similar salad to that salad somewhere else. You're getting a salad at Trader Joe's. Do you want to know there's another Trader Joe's salad that's better for you? Or you're having this Dannon yogurt. What if you're having this blueberry Dannon yogurt? Do you know that there's another Dannon yogurt that's actually has lower GL for whatever reason that you can have? Or maybe you're going to have, over time, maybe there's a vanilla yogurt you're willing to have with fresh blueberries. I've written this massive manual on hacking foods that I know one of your questions was going to be like, what's next? Like, I'm really excited about bringing AI to the hacking process because it's not so hard for people to, instead of eating that almond croissant in the morning, if you could eat half of that almond croissant, save half of it, and just have a hard-boiled egg. And if the AI can tell you things like that for you specifically, because they know how you respond to things, it's really phenomenal. So can it be replicated? I think anything can be replicated ultimately it depends by whom and how much does it take and how much nuance. And fortunately for the rigorous scientific world, we have ways of evaluating accuracy and evaluating things. So we live in a scientific world where things are compared rigorously, and it's not like my word against your word, which is challenging because I think that you see the winners are marketers. And so they tend to have a louder voice, but marketing is not the science of the body.
Yeah.
And they are just different things. We all have our own DNA. We are coming at it from different perspectives. And we have come at it from a crazy, geeky, scientific place.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting as you're talking about that, just fundamentally the perspective being predictive versus reactive, even as it relates to the data and what you're telling people and how you're making those recommendations. I do want to talk more about that, but just since you mentioned the marketing piece, you talked about starting out doing all this kind of behind the scenes research, even clinical studies, it sounds like, and then moving into getting this in the hands of customers. Well, at the same time, other companies have taken the approach of, we're going to talk about weight loss. We're going to talk about performance. We're going to talk about optimization of these biomarkers. We're going to build up kind of a massive wait list and leverage influencers and different kind of high profile people, especially in kind of like the tech investor world. And then we'll slowly roll it out to them and get these various kind of like data points as we are in a beta phase. How have you approached this marketing piece, going to market, launching to people, and actually, acquiring customers to this point?
Yeah, I would like to come to that in one moment. I want to say that I sincerely mean this as a public service announcement. I worry about marketing companies going to health. I worry about people minimizing and simplifying and caricaturizing metabolic health, something as complex as metabolic health, as keeping your glucose to 110, which is what I've heard from people doing when they use some products. That scares the hell out of me. When someone says, a reporter asked me, are you having trouble with people getting obsessive with your product and like not eating anymore? I said, sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. They said, well, we were interviewing somebody else and people they don't want to eat anymore because they don't want their glucose to ever rise. That is not metabolic health. That is not metabolic flexibility. And so I think there is a lot of disservice that marketing companies can do to people by simplifying things in this way that are just insane. The goal is not for you to keep your glucose at a certain level. You should exercise. You are a thinking person. Your glucose is going to go up. If you are metabolically healthy, you're able to eat something and produce the right amount. You have the right balance in your body in terms of how much insulin gets produced, how quickly it gets produced to get to that glucose. And you may be just fine being able to eat certain things. Metabolically unhealthy, if you're metabolically unhealthy, we can start talking about how to not exasperate your unhealthiness and how we want to then try to eliminate or hack your high spiking foods, but not all foods. I think we exist to help people actually eat intelligently and to eat differently and to eat smartly, but not to not eat. So you could simplify things and you could say, well, you get a spike when you have carb. If you have no carb, you'll lose weight. Hence, everything's cool. We disagree. We are proud that we have started from science. We are proud that we have spent so many years in understanding deeply how people's bodies work and building the models that we have, that we are proud of not simplifying and dumbing down, if you will, for people or trying to show something for what it's not. So how have we gone to market? So we went to market in November of 2020 after we put out our poster in the summer of 2020, and we started selling our product and we got to a decent amount of revenue, and there was a lot of buzz in early 2021 around metabolic health. So we got to a decent amount of revenue, and we decided we wanted a better, different user experience that really showcased our AI and made things possible for people they couldn't do with other products. Essentially, other products were just copying what we were doing. The tracker we had built in our clinical trial to collect data and to put heart rate and glucose on the same graph. So they were copying that and throwing on, a dish on it. So tracker we created in 2018, actually. And they were throwing a score, like scoring this dish versus scoring that dish. So we decided to invest in the next version of our product. So we began developing, we brought on someone who was a key executive at IDEO in design for a decade. And she has been guiding product design for the version 2 of our product. And that version 2 is coming out in alpha in August and then in beta in September and October. We got to a number of users. We've actually published a white paper based on the results that the first 2,000 people had. Our program lowered weight. We weren't trying to get people to lower weight, but it lowered weight. It increased the amount of fiber intake, increased the amount of protein intake, which helps with satiety, as you know. It reduced overall carbs, overall calories, and it increased also time in range. So it was a very successful program. And people have told us anecdotally that they've lost 10, 20 pounds, but that was not the goal. That's not how we've marketed ourselves, and that's not how we put ourselves out. We are truly about getting metabolically healthy, and we're really working on people's underlying physiology. And the levers we use for that is, one is intermittent fasting. So with our product, you are able passively to track your fasting period and your eating period. And we slowly increase your fasting period over time. That, along with calorie restriction, which is our second lever, has been shown in literature to be beneficial for improving insulin sensitivity. Based on your activity levels and lots of other features about you, we determine how many calories you should be consuming. So if you go and look at someone like me on the internet, it will tell me I can eat 2,500 calories. Actually, I can only eat about 1,000 calories, believe it or not, without gaining a lot of weight every day. So January figures out your caloric intake, ideal caloric intake, and it's dynamically calculated. So it's reporting back to you. If you do a 10-mile run, then it figures those things out. We also encourage more fiber intake, which is, as I mentioned, there in literature, there's quite a bit of evidence that having fiber in your body, in fact, like I said, ancestral diets had 150 grams of fiber a day. And right now, average American is taking 10 or 15 grams of fiber a day versus what they should be having for women, 20 to 25 grams a day, for men, 30 to 38 grams of fiber a day. So we encourage more fiber, which actually makes you feel more full. It lowers your blood sugar. And we also, we're the ones who came up with activity immediately after food and popularized that over years. And we showed evidence of that by doing it. We used to eat something and walk in our office. We called it translationalizing. And we've been talking about it for the last 4.5 years. So we talk about activity, and our AI does something very cool with activity insights. It does counterfactuals. So it says, you ate this, Joe, you had this food, you had steak and eggs. Had you walked after your steak and eggs for 10 minutes, this would be your curve. Had you walked 25 minutes, this would be your curve. So you can actually see, oh, I can eat that. Okay, that's cool. That's fine. I have time. No problem. I'll eat it. I'll have the mashed potatoes, but I'm going to get right on it. I'm going to get up and start moving. So we do activity insights. And the fifth thing is we look at your spiking foods specifically, and we give you recommendations of alternative foods. So you can have the same food, but with lower GL. You can have a similar food with lower GL. You can have the same food with less quantity. You can have the same food, but take some parts of it out. So I think the company has invested tremendously in nutritional intelligence, and it will continue to invest heavily into nutritional intelligence. We want to make precision nutrition possible for everyone, whether you're eating at McDonald's or buying your groceries, or you're picking a pizza for your kid, or whatever you're doing. Be able to compare foods and be able to see what you should have.
Yeah, for sure. When you talk about kind of initially going to market and then wanting to then refocus on the next version. So are people currently using the first version?
Yeah.
Are you onboarding people to the second version yet?
Yeah, we're not marketing it. We haven't been marketing it since last December, and we have been building the new. Yes, people can go to our website and sign up for our alpha right now. And yes, we are continuing to sell the V1 because it was successful in terms of producing outcomes, in terms of increasing time in range and things that are clinically validated, like weight. It does lots of other things as well. But yes, our V2 is going to be coming out. We will market our V2, and we would love for people to go out and try our V2 and give us feedback and help us dial that product. It's going to be the initial version of V2 that's going to come out in September, and then we're going to have this rolling thunder of other features that are added. Each release is going to add features to it as we go.
Yeah, and I think you said it really well of being concerned about the marketing, right? And people kind of pushing, whether it's these different weight loss, performance, what have you, or kind of overly simplifying or promising these outcomes when really it's not necessarily scientifically backed or proven that is going to be the outcome. We talk often about how it's, especially in like the health tech and fitness tech space, like it's way easier to make money than it is to deliver an outcome. And it's way easier to raise money than it is to deliver an outcome. And I think we see a lot of that and sometimes get caught up in this kind of growth at all costs. But at the same time, you were kind of talking a little bit about some folks copied putting the, XYZ feature, putting heart rate in this, and you kind of initially publicized or pushed the idea of, being physically active after the meal and some of the other things that you've seen. I guess my question is, and this for other founders who are working on this, like, how do you balance wanting to grow and put your flag or stake in the ground and pioneer some of these things with the idea of like, oh, we have to have a product out there? It's like, can we go through the process of clinical trials or getting this thing scientifically backed, doing the research, developing the features, while also kind of like getting maybe surpassed in a way or getting copied or the risk of being copied? How do you balance the patience that it takes to like deliver that outcome with having a product out there in market?
I think that's a really good question. It takes focus to do certain things. And I don't know, Apple Computer was behind Microsoft in so many years in terms of market share. And I think you're building a DNA for your company. You're building a DNA that is scientifically rigorous, as opposed to, on show and on display and in marketing all the time. I think you have to decide what kind of DNA you want to build for the company. And, I think that is a hard decision to make, of course. And we've taken our approach. There are other valid approaches. We applaud everyone that's trying to help people in metabolic health, and we think there's room for everyone. I mean, let me tell you this. In metabolic health, you have, let's say, 15 companies. They have fewer than 2 million users. So count Livongo that went public or got sold for $18.5 billion. Count everyone. Count Omada, Livongo, Virta, Vita, Onduo, Level 2. Count Levels, Nutrisense, Signos, January, Super Sapiens, everyone, Steady Health, everyone and everyone. You don't have 2 million users, but you have 96 million people who are believed to have prediabetes. I don't mean they just want to be fit. I mean, they actually on their way to, they are metabolically unhealthy. You have 37.5 million people with diabetes in this country, and 22% of them don't even know they have that. So you have 133 million people with diabetes or prediabetes, and the 15 companies that are supposed to address them have 2 million people. What's wrong with that picture? Do we need more marketing for that? Is it just marketing? Is that it? Will marketing take care of it? And we'll just like own more and more of that people? Or do we need a combination? I think marketing is important. It's important for creating awareness. It's important for education. And it's important for increasing access. But I also think that science is critically important, and you must remain committed first and foremost in imparting information that's scientifically accurate and scientifically correct, and not misleading swaths of population to think their glucose should not be over 110. That's insane. So how do you do it? It's hard. I don't think we've nailed it. I think that it's almost like a false choice right now. You can either be good at this or good at that, but can you be good at both? And I think over time you can be good at both. I think we each come at it from a different perspective, and we have, our strength, what's rooted in our DNA, and then we try to, get better at the other game. So I do think, though, that there is so much room for solutions right now. There's so much, and I do think the power of AI to really transform health. You don't need to wear a CGM all year long. I think some business models are based on you wearing a CGM all year long or wearing a CGM for several months. You don't need to do that. So if we can build a model of you, and then you can essentially know how you react to different things without wearing a CGM, then more people can do this. More people can afford this. CGMs don't cost that much. So we imagine a world where 130 million people would wear a CGM at least once a year. That's our dream. If everybody with diabetes or prediabetes could throw on a CGM once a year, that'd be amazing. And I think what we are able to do for consumers with AI, we're able to enable mindful shopping at the grocery store, mindful choosing of foods at a restaurant, mindful recipe picking to cook for your family. You're able to essentially see the role of activity and everything else in your blood glucose. For payers, employers, and providers more and more, they're consolidating, they're becoming risk-bearing organizations. For these folks, we can bring the cost of diabetes management way, 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 way down. And so, you can bring it down to a few dollars instead of, hundreds and thousands of dollars. And that has huge ramifications.
Yeah.
So if they could throw, 2 CGMs a year, 4 CGMs a year on the whole type 2 population, instead of just the 3.5 million people with diabetes that are intense insulin users, we could benefit tremendously. It doesn't cost that much. There are also ramifications for other industries. I think food companies are trying to develop more healthy foods, and we're able, with our digital twins, to give them the kind of intelligence that they normally don't have in their product development process. So we're able to help them see how people with diabetes or prediabetes would do on their various foods, and decide how to reformulate their foods to be healthier for the population. I think food companies are trying to produce better foods. I think Big Food wants to be on the right side of history here. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting partnerships coming about.
Yeah, I think a key thing to think about, and as you were talking about that kind of mindful eating and helping people make better choices, grocery shopping, giving them an idea of, the impact that this is having on their body, and hopefully in a way that leads them to make changes, right? And I think that's a key piece of the puzzle. And as we get towards the end of the conversation, wanted to pivot to that a little bit. Like, there is a lot of talk about, whether it's the hardware,
behavior change,
the software piece of it. Yeah. But getting to the punchline of it, it's like, we may know all these things, and maybe we do get a glucose monitor on everybody once a year, or maybe even multiple times a year. But how do we get that next step? Because even now, right, I would venture to guess that people who don't even know what a glucose monitor is and will never wear one have a decent understanding that they probably shouldn't eat that ice cream or the bag of chips. They probably should be walking or more physically active. Like, they probably should be going to bed, or, trying to get sufficient sleep, but they're not doing it. How do we nudge people or force people, right, to take that next step of actually implementing this stuff that we're giving them all this really great data about?
Well, we can't force them. The literature has shown that. So literature has shown that you can't tell people not to eat something, which is why it's hard to commit 100% to a keto diet or back a keto diet, because it's really hard. As soon as you tell people don't eat something, that's all they want to do. So literature says basically the best you can do is to say, here's some things that are healthy for you, eat more of these. And here's some things that are not so healthy for you, so eat less of these. That's the approach we've taken from day one. The small nudges, atomic habits, tiny habits, all of those work. So Apple Watch is a prime example. It's not overly gamified. If you want to know, if you want to geek out on data with Apple, Watch, you can. It can tell you all sorts of things about you. For example, I learned that the average amount of time I stand is 7 minutes. So when it tells me to stand, I stand. I take the AI's recommendation, but then I sit down fairly quickly. So I now understand, my goal is to try to take it from 7 minutes to 10 minutes, and then keep improving it so that I can be standing up more. So you can geek out on that. So Apple Watch is not overly gamified, but it's gamified a bit. You're trying to close those 3 rings. There's small, frictionless nudging, frictionless nudging. So I think user experience is ultimately what's going to create mass adoption. And user experience, I think, is being able to do those small nudges to people, which we can. We are able to tell you your last meal sleep gap. We can tell you passively when you last ate, and if you ate too close to your sleep, whether that's going to, we can share with you how close to your bedtime you're eating, so that you can try to maintain a 3-hour time frame. We can slowly nudge you to get you closer to that. So if you're eating right before your sleep, we can slowly, just like your Oura ring, which I'm wearing right now, tells you ideal bedtime for you is between this and this tonight. We can tell you the ideal eating time for you is between this and this to have the last thing that you're going to eat. So we can do by small nudges and user experience is the way to deal with the human. There are some structural issues going on in our society, which no hardware or software is going to really change. And that's the kind of food that we're eating right now, the kind of, subsidies that certain commodities get. And those commodities on their own are not dangerous, but when they are sold in such abundance, so cheaply, and they become the source of nutrition for tens of millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, then it becomes a real problem. So I think the structural lack of movement in our society, structural foods that we eat, the standard American diet, the low fiber, high carb foods that we're eating are also causing problems. But there's at least 100 million optimizers out there, people that are wearing a fitness tracker, belong to a gym or on a diet, etc. There are people who want to move in the right direction. The question is, how do we empower them? How do we help them? And we strongly believe that we want to help them understand, onboard them onto a health journey if they're not already on a health journey, help them stay on that health journey, help them have a nuanced view of their health as opposed to a single measure. So it used to be A1C or cholesterol. Now it's your weight. Now it's your time and rate, not having your glucose go. No, we want them to understand holistically the levers that are available to them. And they will adopt some of those levers. They will not adopt all of those levers. So it is true that the healthiest people share the same disciplines. Like if you take some very healthy people, they're more or less, a lot of them are doing similar things. But not everyone can adopt all of those things. People can adopt one or two of those things. And as their interest level goes up, you can introduce more things to them. So that's why we provide calorie restriction, restricted eating, time restricted eating, fiber, all that. It's like, can't pick up all 5. Okay. Can you pick up 1? That's easy for you to do. Just add fiber. So I think that there's no silver bullet. I think it's about nudges. It's about valuable data. You can't get people to do everything differently. You can get them to do some things differently, do a little bit better in some things, a little bit less of the harmful things over time.
Yeah, I think that's really well said.
And of course, community. I think community is also really important because no one changes by themselves. Everyone is, we're social animals. So
yeah,
we need to change with people around us.
There's so many factors. And I think as you frame it, even this simplicity, small nudges, consistency over time, making those changes, making sure that they're implemented, having support system around you. I mean, I think so many times it gets overlooked. We talk about the power of the technology and some of the things, the hardware, software, you name it, but it's like, well, what about food deserts? And what about access to parks and green space? And what about people that, don't have no community or support system? It's like, that's not going to be solved with technology necessarily. So yeah, it's trying to think about then, well, what are the things that we can impact, right? As founders, entrepreneurs, people, investors who are starting and backing companies, like to move that needle. And I think that kind of small nudge over time is huge.
Yeah. And I think as people, we have multiple levers for change. So for myself, one lever of change for me is January. So I spent, 14 hours a day on that. That's very important. But also I'm also supporting White House conference on food and nutrition that's coming up in September. So I spend my time understanding what are the social issues around food, what is the role of government, which can be massively positive or massively negative. I mean, the US government just outweighs everything else you can do in society. It's just so massive and so powerful in the way that it funds subsidies to farmers, in the way that it funds school lunches, in the way that it funds, for example, SNAP program, etc. And so I am extremely passionate about the role of policy and government. So I work in that as well. I also spend my time on an innovation council with food companies and trying to understand how big food can come along on this journey, because that is part of the solution. So I think all of us can make impact through the private sector. We can make impact through government and policy. We can, in terms of policies we support and people that we support, and as well as through philanthropy, as well as through nonprofits, private sector, and governments, and communities and local communities. So I have a portfolio strategy to change. My passion is getting everyone to eat a little bit more mindfully and consider what's right for them. Like I've done my whole genome sequence, and like I'm not supposed to really take Advil. It has to do with some protein that your kidney produces and that sort of thing. That's great. I love knowing that. I now also know that Tylenol, I don't metabolize that very fast. So I know if I get a headache, it's going to be 2 hours before I have health. So I now don't do things that trigger a headache. I know if I have caffeine or sugar in the middle of the afternoon, I'm going to get a headache. So I don't do that anymore. So I don't have those things. Yeah. I also gave up like cow dairy, and I don't have sinus infections anymore, which I used to have all the time. So, I mean, you just find out and you go, okay, it takes a while. It really does take a while. I mean, I used to chug like half and half as a child. So like for me to give up certain things was really hard. And I do still, of course, absolutely enjoy it from time to time, but I'm not chugging it every day. It's not my regular food. It's my joy. I eat it for fun, not for sustenance. So I think if we empower people with more information about what works for them and what doesn't work for them, and we give them tools to kind of do this frictionlessly as opposed to with a lot of friction, and we have the small nudges and we have the community support, and at the same time we work on policy and we work on big food in conjunction with food, I think we can make forward progress.
Yeah, to your point, it's all the above. I think it's
exactly
an all the above approach.
That's exactly right.
Given the chronic conditions and obesity and lack of physical activity and big food and government subsidies, like it's going to take that all hands on deck approach to move us forward in the right direction. So definitely with you on that one. In wrapping up, and we'll get you out of here on this, it sounds like, a lot to look forward to, I think, this fall, talking about the alpha and then the beta launch. So for folks that want to follow along and just keep up to date as that rolls out and interested in trying the product where it is today, where would you point them and what should they look out for?
Come to January.ai and join the alpha. Alpha is going to be pretty rough, but come and give us your feedback. But hopefully, by the time beta rolls around, things are going to be more wonderful. So yeah, I think the best thing is if you feel passionately that we need more solutions out there, and you feel that January speaks to you, come help us develop an amazing product. Just give us your feedback. That's what we really want.
Fantastic. I definitely hope folks take you up on that, and super grateful that you made some time to join us today.
Thank you so much, Joe.